Hey everybody, welcome to the Real United States, and it is anniversary time again. Today is the 50th anniversary of the first flight of the very well-known Boeing 747. Now, I know some of you may be going, no, that's not true, Paul. The first time you could fly on a 747 was in 1970, and that's true, but that's not what I said. Today is the first time the plane flew. It had been designed and tested and examined and everything, but it never flew. Now here I got a picture of the prototype when it was revealed to the public. And, beautiful, beautiful piece of equipment. But it was actually on February 9th, 1969, 50 years ago today, that this flew for the very first time. Now, obviously, you don't, fly something once and then put it into service with hundreds of people on board. You test it, and you test it, and you tweak it, and you do things, And it wasn't until, it was in fact more than a year later on January 15th. All right, not more than a year, almost a year. On January 15th of 1970, that First Lady Pat Nixon, the wife of the president, christened the very first commercial Boeing 747. Now, obviously, she didn't go up and crack a bottle of champagne over it because champagne bottles, if you're not familiar with them, are pretty husky. I saw astronaut John Young cut his hand on one time, busting it over a steak. In person, I saw this happen. It was most unfortunate. You don't bash an airplane with something like this. So what they did is they actually sprayed red, white, and blue water onto the plane as to ceremoniously christen the very first 747. And then it was like a week later, on January 22nd of 1970, when it actually took its first commercial flight carrying passengers. Pan Am was the first airline company actually to order and use the 747. This first flight in 1970 was in their New York to London route, I believe. And but again, so it took like almost a year. I mean, within a couple of weeks of being a year from the time that the prototype was first flown in 1969 until it actually became a commercially viable operating platform. And as I said, Pan Am ordered it. And I think to some degree Pan Am was responsible in part, for the design. Now, the whole mental set of these jumbo jets, actually started, at the beginning of the decade in the early 1960s, when the military was looking for, larger aircraft with bigger payloads and bigger openings, and they started nosing around making studies, I think, in 1963. And then in about 1964, they actually put out, a request for bid for these heavy platforms, which I think ultimately became the C-141 Starlifter. Forget who built that won that contract, but the then president CEO of Pan Am, realized that there was a problem growing. Air traffic, commercial air traffic, and it was really starting to take off. No pun intended. All right? It was starting to grow like exponentially in the 1960s. More and more people were embracing it as, kind of normal and like, hey, we'll just fly there. So air traffic was growing and growing and growing, but you had these limited sized planes and a whole bunch of people, so you had traffic, and some of the larger airports, this was becoming untenable. So the CEO of Pan Am said, why don't we just build bigger planes and with the same amount of people and have less traffic? So they were in part responsible for the impetus, I should say, towards Boeing going, okay, we're going to design a bigger plane. And that's when they started pulling away from the designs, they're pulling people off of the design crews of the 737 and putting them into this new program, which was just by default then the 747. And so that is really the era when this is like, okay, we're going to move the same amount of people with less planes, we're going to reduce traffic, and hopefully we're going to increase safety. I mean, the 747 does not have a perfect safety record by any stretch of the imagination, but it is, by and large, an enormously stable and safe platform. Now, obviously, being this big, and fairly luxurious aircraft, it was eventually adopted by the United States Air Force. I don't really know who is responsible for Air Force One, but at any rate, the government ultimately said, hey, we need 2 of these for the president and his staff, and of course the press pool, to be able to travel quickly to destinations around the country and around the world. And so it was the 747 that became the Air Force One, the official platform of the United States president and his staff. So that I don't know if there was a plane, and you might want to leave this down in the comments if you know, if the president had a designated plane prior to the 747. I really don't know. If back in the days when Nixon and before Nixon, Eisenhower, Kennedy, Eisenhower, those guys had a plane or not. I really don't know, but we all are very familiar with that, bulbous part of the front of the plane of Air Force One as being the 747. And again, that was actually into the 1970s before that plane became commercially viable. So that all stems the success of the maiden flight 50 years ago today, and out of Everett, Washington, incidentally, the home of Boeing, who of course designed and built the 747, and it has over the years, they thought that they were only going to build like 400 of these ever, and that would be pretty much it. And yet they still spent $1 billion in 1960s dollars, okay, which is 7.2 billion by today's standards, in the development and construction of this plane. So it turned out that everybody loved it. And in order to remain competitive, the other airlines said, okay, well, we're going to buy one of those too. We're going to actually buy like a boatload of them. And last I knew, from what I had read, there was like over 1,500 of them that had been manufactured and in service, and still like 22 of them on order now. So, they way exceeded Boeing's expectations on what the demand for this aircraft would be. And, they have since made other series. There's a 5.7, a 6.7, and, of course, the 777, the Boeing 777, which is a gigantic plane. But I've ridden in the 757. I've never been in a 747. The 757 is it's not the most pleasant ride I've ever had in the air. It's quite tight and it's rough, but it gets you there, and it gets you there inexpensively. I will say that for it. It's an inexpensive ride in a Boeing 757. But anyway, the 747s, usually because of the capacity of those, are going long distance flights. Those are cross-country flights or overseas flights. So, since I don't normally fly those long distances, I've never had the opportunity to fly in one, but I understand that they're, when you get in them, they really feel solid, stable. It's just a very solid feel to them. Anyway, I just thought you might enjoy knowing that today was the anniversary. 50 years ago, believe it, 50 years ago, this plane is still being made, still in service. The Boeing 747. So, happy birthday to the Boeing 747. I hope you've enjoyed this. You got questions or comments? Well, I'll do what I can to answer them. I certainly love hearing from all of you, and I try to get back to everybody I can. So leave in the comment section down below. I certainly appreciate it. If you're new here, hey, welcome, and consider clicking subscribe to come along for the adventure, because we got lots more to show you. And as always, folks, well, thank you for watching. So I'm going to do this little epilogue for those hardcore fans that are still watching after the closing music. And this, you'll notice I've been doing a lot of episodes back to back from here in the studio, and that I haven't been in the field as much. And that's mostly because of weather and because I haven't been feeling terribly well. Now, don't panic. My cancer isn't back, and I'm not dying, not to my knowledge, not anytime soon anyway. And I haven't felt well for some time now. Various problems with my stomach and stuff, I don't, I'm getting good medical care. I'm under constant doctor's attention, so I don't think there's anything wrong, and neither does anybody else. But eventually Beverly and I will be getting back in the field as we get towards the warmer weather. We're 6 weeks out from the beginning of the Cherry Blossom Festival, and so Beverly's very excited about that. So as the weather gets a little more amenable, we will get back out. So don't be concerned too much for my welfare or what's going on with the channel. We will be going back out, doing some small town America that y'all had asked for last fall. I haven't forgotten. That wasn't for naught. We do have some particular towns actually picked out, and we're doing some research about. So I just wanted you to know that everything's fine, and that we will be getting back in the field as soon as the weather and my health both cooperate. So thanks a lot, folks, and as always, thank you for watching.